Caitlin and welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing well. So today I'm going to be discussing my learning to drive experience. Kind of going to be not really like a story time, but something a bit more where I can really sort of, you know, talk you guys through everything, going from like the theory tests, practical tests, starting lessons, actually learning to drive itself. Got my little notebook here where I wrote some few things down to give me pointers and a few tips and tricks I have for you guys if you are in the process of learning to drive, or if you are wanting to learn and you haven't started yet. Another thing is, this is really ironic because I actually should have been sitting my practical driving test today. However, with the current situation with the coronavirus, it has been postponed to a later date in the year. Enough of me rambling, let's get into the video. First thing I'm going to talk about is actually learning to drive, but there's so many questions you want to ask yourself before you start to learn to drive an actual car, such as like you need to choose your transmission, you want to get a good instructor, so you need to realise what type of vehicle you want to drive, whether if it's an automatic car or a manual car. I decided to learn in a manual car, which is the gear stick, if you didn't already know, and plus as well you obviously, it's more like the norm to drive a manual car. Before you even book any lessons, you want to get a good instructor, and there is so many driving schools out there that you could go with. I found the best way to find out was through word of mouth. Obviously you can look online and you can see what people's recommended through like top 10s, or you might just see what is local to you. But I found word of mouth was so much easier because, say for example, if you've got a family member or if you've got a friend who's actually done driving lessons with that school or with that person and they say they're really good, then you are most likely going to be swayed to go with that person. So I did actually shop around and I asked loads of my friends who they'd been with, and when I seen Pass and Go as the cheapest and they had really good recommendations and a lot of people in my street used them, so I thought I might as well just try them out, and if I didn't like them or if I didn't like my instructor, I always knew I could obviously change. There's no, you know, contract, there's no like tied down routes, you can literally drive with who you want. When considering your instructor, you kind of want to be swayed with how much they're charging, their track record, like their experience, how many stars they've been rated. That's the best way, and obviously through word of mouth as well. For example, with Pass and Go, I would literally just have to ring them up and say, look, I want to switch instructor, I'm not really comfortable with them, for example, so my instructor wouldn't even have to know. So it's simple and easy as that. I started to learn to drive in August last year, and it seems like so long ago, and I found with driving you either start to learn as soon as you turn 17 or you're gonna wait a bit, like me. So it took me about between August and now to learn to drive. Now some people pick it up really quickly and some people are a little bit slower in picking things up, and I'd say I'm probably one of the people who's a little bit slower. I'd say I've probably had the average of about 30 to 40 hours of driving. My driving lessons, they're 2 hours each and they work out at £20 an hour, I think, or £22 an hour, and I do 2 hours, so that's basically £40 a lesson. But what I would highly recommend when you're thinking of starting to drive and you're a bit more comfortable with your instructor and you've had a few lessons with them and you really like them, block book your lessons. And by block booking I mean book about 7 to 10 hours of driving lessons. And it will be a bit costly, that's the only thing with learning to drive, it does cost you a lot to learn. I used to only do 10 hours, so I would block book 10 hours and then I would do the next 10 hours, and it actually works out a lot cheaper in the long run. It might not seem it when you're paying for them out there, but it works out a lot cheaper, I would say, because you're saving a lot more coins than what you would do if you were just doing single lessons. Depending what your everyday life is, whether you're at uni, school, work, sixth form, I would say probably 1 lesson a week should suffice. I might want to do a bit more. I sometimes used to do 2 lessons a week every now and again, but I do recommend doing 1 lesson a week because it's not too much of it's taken out of your time, and I just found it was nice to just, no matter what was going on in my life, I could literally just jump in the car and drive my instructor for 2 hours and I would absolutely love it. And I know some people might not be able to afford to do a lesson a week, which is absolutely fine. Do what's good for you. However, it just means that I found that if I didn't drive for about 2 weeks, I would slip up within the first hour. But yeah, I would definitely recommend doing a lesson a week. So you might actually be wondering, how do I go about booking lessons? Now it depends obviously which driving school or driving instructor you are with, how they might do it, but with my driving school, Pass and Go, basically when you want to start learning to drive, you make an account online and you have like a credit allowance. So depending on how many hours you book online will determine your credit allowance. So say for example, if I say had 10 hours, I would have 10 hours. And I could obviously just book that in, and they have a little bit online which is called the booking calendar, and you can click on that and it will see your instructor's entire diary for weeks and months. So you can obviously just book in when they're free and when it's convenient for you. However, with my driving instructor, he is really busy majority of the time. He has a lot of customers, so what I tend to do is when I've bought my 10 hours, I tend to book for the full month, so then I've got everything sorted in. I've looked at my calendar and said, oh, I'm free here, here and here, and then it just makes it a lot easier. However, you can just book in whenever. I found that sometimes as well, if I was on Christmas break or like Easter or like summer break, I started learning the summer holidays, I had a lot more free time, which is kind of what determined me to learn to drive, because I had so much more free time. But I think is that you really just need to sort of just go with it and just bite the bullet, because I always used to say, oh, I'm going to learn here and I'm going to learn here, or oh, I'm going to start here, and I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to go for it. What's the worst that could happen? And honestly, learning to drive it's scary, but it's not as scary as it may seem. However, one of my top tips with learning to drive is honestly, don't be scared. Now, that sounds so weird to say because there is so many scary things when driving. I found roundabouts are really scary, closed junctions, crossroads, everything like that I found is really, really scary. However, I noticed I always had a fear before I started learning that I would crash, and I would be one of them students who would crash their instructor's car. But the more I've started to learn, it doesn't even, you know, doesn't even fathom, it doesn't even come to my head half of the time, which is why, like, I don't know, I always find that, like, once I started learning and once I started feeling a lot more confident, then it just didn't even come, it was like second nature to me, and that's the best way to do it, really. But there is a lot of things, and I would always say when you're learning to drive, you need to be alert no matter what you're doing. I sometimes got really stressed when I was driving because there's so many things I need to do at once. My instructor was like, you need to do that, you need to do that, make sure you're doing that, make sure you're going at the speed limit, make sure you're doing this. And it's sometimes a bit like in your head, but you always have to be alert because there's always, literally, you could do one thing that could cause major accident, a major hazard, and you don't want to do that because you don't want to endanger yourself and your own safety, but your instructors as well. Even though you are going to make mistakes, because that's the whole point of learning, but always be alert, always make sure, you know, you're going at the correct speed limit, always be sure of everything around you, the other cars in front of you, behind you, reading your road signs. If you see, you know, traffic lights being on green a long time, always be prepared to stop because they could literally change in literally a second before you're about to go. So you always have to be so prepared for anything that's going to come your way while you're driving. Now your theory test is more like the revision side of things. It is something you have to do to pass your driving test, and you have to pass it before you do your practical test. There are two parts to the theory test. You have like the multiple choice questions, and then you also have the hazard perception. With the questions, it is basically multiple choice of different situations which you could occur. It could be situations, road signs, speed limits, stopping distances, anything about vehicle safety, about the actual car itself, which is the bits I used to hate because I have no idea how a car actually works. So for example, under the bonnet, what actually everything is, I couldn't name it. You get 50 questions and you have to get 43 right to pass. Now I actually quite liked this part, even though some bits were quite hard. I think it's probably a lot easier than the hazard perception, just because it is multiple choice, so you will know one of them obviously is going to be the right answer. A lot of them are common sense, so it could be situations like, oh, what do you do if a pedestrian's walking across the zebra crossing? Obviously you'd stop and you would wait till they are fully off the crossing and it's safe to go. Simple things like that. However, you will get harder ones, which could be like, what is this road sign? It could be a difficult road sign that you don't know. I used to struggle with these quite a lot, however I did start to pick up a lot more. The hazard perception bit, you have to get 44 out of 75 to pass, and you have 14 clips which you will get shown, and it will basically be like kind of like virtual reality of you driving, pretending like you're in the car, and you will just be looking at this screen, and as soon as you see a hazard you have to click it. This will tally up your points towards the end, and then you will find out if you pass. To book your driving theory test, you can actually start it before you start learning to drive, to be honest. You don't actually need it to learn to drive, all you need is your provisional. However, I didn't want to do mine before I started learning, because what I found is you pick up so much more from the theory test once you start learning to drive. So I found that learning to drive kind of helped revise for my theory test in a way. And obviously always best to just ask your instructor, just say, do you think I'm ready to put in for my theory, and see what their advice is first before you do it. But it's entirely up to you, it's your personal choice, everyone's different really. My top tip would be to start revising early. I'd say I started after my first month of driving lessons, I would say, just because it helps a lot more when you pass your theory, because then it's kind of done out the way. It doesn't expire after 2 years, so as long as you pass your test during them 2 years, then it is absolutely fine. I actually used an app which actually really helped with me revising for my theory test, and it is a paid app, but it was really recommended by, I've seen people online used it, and also my driving instructor said it was really good, and it's called Theory 4-in-1. And you do have to pay for it from the Apple or Google store. I think it is literally £4 or something, it's literally not a lot, but it is such a good app to use. And obviously with having it on my phone, I could revise on the go. So obviously I get the train to uni, so I was always on the train using it, or if I'm sitting at home not doing anything, I would use it. So on the actual app, you obviously get your highway code, your road signs, your hazard perception, and the actual theory test, which is kind of like the multiple choice questions. But you get so much content in there, which is honestly, that's why I really recommend it, because you get so much in there. And you can do a lot of mock tests on there, so this would be like what it would actually be like in the, when you actually go to do your test. So I found that that really helped me. And you get obviously all the clips from the hazard perception. You won't get the exact ones you'll get on the day of your test, but I found mine were actually the same clips but different hazards in the clips. So that actually really helped me, because I was like, oh, I recognise this, I know it. So it actually made it probably a lot more easier for me. You may actually be wondering, how do I go about booking my theory test? So it's actually really simple. I'll leave the link down below in the description box. Just go online and book your theory test. You book obviously the date and time which you think is convenient. It's just obviously on a little calendar, and you just slot in obviously the best day for you to do it. When you go and do your theory test is you actually you go in, you obviously check in at the reception, you put all your stuff like in a locker, obviously you have no mobiles, no nothing on you, and then you'll go to the back to like a second reception, and they'll check obviously your provisional license, etc. Then you get called in and you either do your hazard perception first or you basically like 50 questions. I did my 50 questions first, and it's literally just on a little computer. It's just like kind of like little cubicles. You couldn't see each other, you can talk to each other, and it just has instructions on the screen, and then obviously it talks you through what you're going to do on the test, and then you start it. And once you've done that, it'll move straight on to your hazard perception, and then you basically do that. And once you've actually completed the test, you just go out the room and you basically just go to the reception where you checked in, and they will give you your result, and they fold it over as well, which makes it 10 times worse, I find, so you don't actually see like if you passed or not. And I remember I was literally stood there and I was like I was like that, and I was so scared. On the questions I got 45 out of 50, like 55 out of 75 on the hazard perception. But one of my key things for the hazard perception is literally every time you see a hazard, click it at least twice, but don't continuously click, because that can actually be registered as cheating. So don't just keep clicking all the way through, because it obviously, you know, you don't want to be kicked out or you don't want to fail. I actually found after I passed my theory test and I'd revised everything, when I was driving with my instructor, I just found that I picked up so much more. I could read all the road signs, I knew what was going on, and I knew stuff, and it kind of it made driving so much easier. So that's why I do recommend obviously doing it, you know, during when you're driving, because you learn so much more along the way. It's kind of weird me actually doing this video because I haven't actually passed my driving test yet, but I kind of thought because it's still learning to drive and I should have done my practical test today, then, you know, it's kind of, it is what it is. After you've obviously passed your theory test, it's time to obviously get prepared for your practical driving test. It's kind of weird me actually doing this video because I haven't actually passed my driving test yet, but I kind of thought because it's still learning to drive and I should have done my practical test today. So once you've booked up and you've got a test date, that is a date you can obviously work towards. You choose which test centre you want to do. So you talk to your instructor which test centre you think you would want to do it at. I found that with test centres, the best thing is through word of mouth. So if you've had a friend who went and done their practical driving test at a test centre which wasn't very good, then sis, you don't want to go there. You'll get a route you've obviously done if you've done all of the test routes, and you will get one of the 3 manoeuvres. So the 3 manoeuvres obviously I have is parking in a bay and reversing out, pull up on the right hand side and reverse back 2 car lengths, and you will also get parallel park. I love parallel park. It's probably the one I'm most confident with. You do basically 39 to 40 minutes of driving with an examiner. They'll basically tell you where to go. You might do 20 minutes of sat nav, which is, I think 3 out of 5 get that, so most likely you probably will get it. You're only allowed 15 minors in your driving test, and your minors can literally be simple things as like not checking your mirror or, you know, not checking your blind spots. It can be literally simple things like that. So when you're doing your test, I can imagine you have to think really clearly. It might even help like if you have to talk to yourself. You want to make sure you're doing no majors as well. So that is the end of today's video. I hope you guys found it useful, and probably my top tip out of this entire video was to be confident in your driving. It can be so hard, but honestly, don't be scared, just go with it. It doesn't matter if you stall, it doesn't matter if you fuck up, as long as you don't crash then you are pretty much okay. So honestly, if you're thinking about learning to drive, go for it. Honestly, I absolutely love it, and I'm just hoping I pass my test first time when it actually comes to taking it. I've learned so much while driving, so honestly I highly recommend it. It's a great skill to have. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it and you learned something, or if let me know in the comments down below if you drive, if you're considering to learn to drive, you know. If you have any questions about driving, then just leave them in the comments down below. Please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe while you're over here. I'm trying to film a lot more since we're in self-isolation. It kind of just gives you guys a bit of escape from, you know, obviously what is going on in the world of today. It's such a scary time, like I said in my previous video, but honestly we will get through it and we will power through. Thank you so much for watching. I love you guys, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!